Hello, everybody. This is Dorie Clark, and we're here with Dina Denham Smith. She is the author of the new book. You can see it right up there, Emotionally Charged, How to Lead in the New World of Work. It's coming out from, coming out? Is it out? What's the deal, Dina?
Can I show you something real quick? Because it came in the mail yesterday. Got their
Oh,
copies. So it's like really happening.
it's happening. Can a
Ships
person buy
next
it
week.
right this minute?
Yeah, you can download it on Kindle like right now and
Okay, well, we
read it at
heartily
lunch.
encourage that. But in the
Yeah.
meantime, we're going to talk about the book. It's from Oxford University Press, which is very nice. It's a good, fancy press, and we are going to answer some of your questions as well. Of what exactly we need to learn about emotions and leadership and all of these important questions that we're dealing with today. And in the meantime, I'd like to say, if you are listening, we'd love to hear who you are. So please type your name and where you are into the chat box, and any questions that you have for Dina. So Dina, my first question, okay, emotionally charged, how to lead in the new world of work. I can appreciate the value and the validity of this topic because everything seems emotionally charged right now. And I understand that the premise of the book, you're dealing with reality here, but it also just, for me, seems like one of these things where we kind of shake our fist at the sky. Like, why? Why do leaders have to be therapists now? That's what it feels like so often. So if you're a leader and watching this, you're feeling pressure around this, like, this seems like a new, I mean, I'm sure this has always been the case a little bit, but it seems like a new responsibility that leaders have to take on these days. What is up with that? Please give
What
us some
is
clarity.
up with that? Yeah, no, the emotional demands on leaders are higher now than they've ever been before. And so what really happened is, the pandemic created this inflection point. So there were some trends like simmering along slowly in the workplace, and the pandemic really accelerated them. And they're things like more virtual communication due to more remote work and dispersed teams, increased implementation of various digital technologies and AI. We have much heightened employee expectations for supportive leaders and mentally healthy workplaces. And we have an increasingly diverse and polarized workforce. And like the net of these shifts is that they've dramatically increased the emotional demands on leaders. So just by way of a really simple example, it is harder to build trust and motivate teams at a distance, right? There's more conflict to manage when you've got, increased diversity and polarization. The results are still like, you still need to deliver the numbers, but now you also need to be a supportive, safe place for your employees when they're struggling with things in their personal lives. And so the real problem is that, leaders have not been equipped with the training or the resources to handle all of these new demands. Like, it is just no wonder that we have a population of leaders that is stressed, that is burned out. And so what my co-author and I, Dr. Alicia Grandy, what we did is we wrote a book to solve for this big gap. And what it offers to leaders is evidence-based tools, techniques, strategies that they can apply to like the everyday demands and emotional complexities that they need to now handle in this workplace. Because I think what we all want, right, is leaders who can be really successful and effective and still maintain their own well-being.
Yeah, that's really powerful and really necessary. So thank you, Dina. That's great. I'm excited to dive into the conversation with you. But first, I want to greet some of the great folks who are tuning in to join us. We want to say hi to Catherine. She's in Austin. We've got a LinkedIn user from Boston who I think may be my wife. We have Susanna from Malaysia. Camilla is in Copenhagen. She's actually a member of the Trajectory Mastermind, which you were for a couple of years.
I
Dina.
know Camilla.
That's right. Jody is in Texas. Asana is from Senegal. Darlington is in Nigeria. So we got Africa in the house. Jody's also in Dallas. And Catherine, yes, that's great. We've got Lucilla in Mexico City. Lauren is here. Penny from the UK. Penny Triantafilou. How many Triantafilous are there? I got my start in politics working for Catherine Triantafilou, so that's probably your cousin. All right, moving on. So, Dina, I am so curious. So you've set up the stakes here, and we understand. Yes, everything is more polarized here. So what do you recommend for leaders that are just in the thick of this? You've got an employee that comes into your office, just a hypothetical example, they are upset about the government and things that are happening in society, and you are their boss, and there's literally nothing that you can directly do to influence the way the government is working, but somebody is all freaking out. How do you recommend a person should handle a situation like that, just for instance?
Yeah, no, it's a great example. And it's just like one of the many that are showing up now at leaders' desks that didn't used to. Like employees now, they really do expect their leaders to listen to and to support them with personal concerns and worries. In fact, this may blow your mind, but there was a study done not too long ago, and it showed that leaders, on average, help their colleagues with personal issues and concerns about once a day, which is on par with the amount of times that they help with work-related matters. So it's a whole lot, right? And what you can add into this mix is the stress of knowing, well, I still need to focus on results. So like, how do I do all of these things? And then leaders haven't had the training, like they're not even sure of how to necessarily show up in this situation. And it may also be triggering for them, right? So there's just like a lot there. And so what we recommend in our book, and we developed a framework, a really simple framework to guide leaders through conversations like this, is first off, it's a mindset, which is, thinking of yourself as the person who helps someone else find the necessary support, not being the support. You are not the therapist, right? And so the framework, I kind of love the name of it. It's called RAP. And so the R is for recognize. So it is a leader's responsibility to really recognize when a leader or when an employee is struggling. And so someone showing up disgruntled with like the dumpster fire that is today, that's one thing. But sometimes, right, people don't come to your desk. You just notice someone's really out of character or out of sorts. That is something that a leader should very much be paying attention to. One, because that you presumably really care about your team members, but two, when people are struggling, it's going to impact their ability to like be productive and work. And so what you're looking for primarily is behavioral changes. So if someone who used to be reliable and perform at high levels starts calling in sick a lot, right? Or if someone who used to be the social butterfly is more withdrawn. These are things that you should be cueing into. And in the book, in fact, we share a checklist. It was developed by two other psychologists called the Signs of Struggle Checklist. And it's 5 categories of behavioral cues to really like pay attention to. So ours one, recognize it if it does not arrive at your desk. A stands for acknowledge. And so that is about listening and validating and showing just human level empathy for someone's experience or feelings. You're not there to solve it, right? It's just about creating a little bit of safe space for them to express their feelings because by expressing their feelings, it enables to process them, right? Which is so good for that person's not only health, but their ability to then refocus on things that are more work related. And then P is about providing support. And so when someone, when it's not just being disgruntled, but maybe somebody has come to you and said, I'm all sorts of things are arriving, right? I'm really struggling with an addiction issue. I have really intense anxiety and I don't feel like I can present at any group meetings anymore. I am getting a divorce. My child is struggling, like you name it. Leaders are the audience for all of that now. And, at certain companies, there's a lot of resources that are available. And so helping that person access resources through HR or informal resources that might be available online or through the community. Because when someone on your team is actually really struggling, oftentimes like kind of going through the steps to get the support that they need, it's just a really heavy lift. So one way you can really show that you care is by like kind of cutting through some of the administrative hurdles that can stand in the way of having an issue and getting the help that you need.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dina. That's great. We want to say hi to some of the great folks who are tuning in to join us. And if you have questions for Dina Denham Smith, she's the author of Emotionally Charged, type them into the chat box. We want to hear from you. But Yvette is here from Boston as well. We've got a LinkedIn friend from North Wales. Manbir is here from Canada. We've got a LinkedIn friend from Charleston, South Carolina. Laura is in Mexico, in which case it's probably Laura. So hello. Mustafa is from Sweden. Palaniapan is here. Welcome. We've got Izuogo for Sunday from Nigeria. Mariko is from Cincinnati. Helga is in Angola. Janet's in Houston. Amanda, I know she's in Boise. We've got our recognized expert contingent with her and Janet here. We're so happy to have all of you. Please like and comment and share on this, and type your questions in here so that we can hear what's on your mind when it comes to emotionally charged leadership. This is great. So a question, Dina, that I have, you talk about the concept of emotional upskilling, which I think is quite interesting. Can you explain what that is and why that is important? How do we do that?
Buy my book. No. So emotional upskilling, I mean, really the parallel is we've talked for years about digital upskilling, right? Like we need to acquire new skills for to stay relevant at work. Well, emotional upskilling is that same notion, right? That just that the stakes are higher, the demands are much heightened for leaders in terms of the emotional capacities that they need to handle some of the situations they need to deal with, as well as their own emotions leading in a very uncertain, fast-paced, high-pressure world. And so emotional upskilling is just the idea of like the game has changed. Like we all, no matter where we are on the spectrum of emotional skills, like there's more to learn. And when we learn these things, leaders especially can be more effective in their roles today. And most importantly, you know, emotional health, it's like a real thing. When we have emotional skills, we can handle the stresses, we can handle the complexities, we can handle the pressures in ways that that don't compromise our own well-being.
Yeah, so important. I think that's great. This is Dorie Clark. We're here with Dina Denham Smith. You can learn more about her and her work at dinadsmith.com. If you want to make sure you never miss one of our shows, you can subscribe to my email newsletter where you get all the good stuff at dorieclark.com/subscribe. And Dina's book is Emotionally Charged: How to Lead in the New World of Work. Please type your questions for Dina into the chat box. We'd love to hear from you and to get your responses. But, you know, one thing that I wanted to just dive deeper into, Dina, is you actually said your research shows that leaders today experience more emotional demands than during the height of the pandemic. I mean, people were like dropping dead then. There was a worldwide pandemic. We were shut in our homes, and things are worse now.
Isn't that
Dear God, help us? Like, what? How do we make sense of this?
Isn't that just exceptional? I know. So we, what Dorie's pointing to is we did a survey of over 200 leaders as part of the research for this book. And this is exactly what they indicated, was that the emotional burden that they were carrying and that the burnout levels were higher. This was sort of late in 2023 versus the height of the pandemic. And, you know, my own theory on why this is because these trends, these that we talked about, like they didn't go away. They've just become more and more entrenched. And so while thankfully, right, like the fear of COVID-19 and some of the extreme protocols under which we all needed to live have gone away, but those changes in the workplace that have increased the emotional demands on leaders have not. Those have stayed.
Yeah, that's so intense and also alarming. So yeah, it certainly shows the need for your book. So we have a great question that came in from fellow recognized expert community member Lauren Margolis. Lauren says, "How do leaders help their employees deal better with stressors while they themselves are facing their own distress?" This is tough. We hear the bromide all the time about put on your own airplane mask here, but how do we actually do that when the leaders, to Lauren's point, are under a huge amount of stress themselves? How do we step up and meet the needs of others?
Yeah. Hi, Lauren. That is an absolutely great question. Because that is one of these tension points that leaders are very much existing in right now, right? Like, I need to support my team. I need some support too. And so one of the things that we really emphasize in the book is, and you called it bromide, and it is sort of this trait, like put on your own oxygen mask. But leader recovery is so fundamental to their ability to be effective as a leader and maintain high performance and their health in these heightened demands. And so what I think is really interesting that we share in the book is there are activities that are proven to enable recovery effectively. And because leaders they need to kind of figure out ways to refuel while still flying the plane, right? Like most people don't have this option to take a 3-month sabbatical and just like zen out on the beach and then come back like ready to support everybody while they feel better. And so it's like, how do you recover as you continue to work? And what's really important is to be building in recovery experiences. And so recovery experiences refer to this research that I was about to share. And so there's really 4 experiential states that are proven to help us recover from emotional demands and highly draining situations, like supporting people through really intense stuff. And one, we've summarized it again in a framework so that it's easy to remember. And the framework is called DARE, because oftentimes it really is like an act of daring to buck the norms and take a break. But D is for detach. Like, it is so fundamental that we take our mind off from work at periods of time. A is for autonomous. We must choose activities that are recovery to us. So when your athletic partner is like, we're going to go on a hike this weekend and it's going to be great, and that is not your idea of recovery, it's not going to help you, right? R is for relaxation. We need activities that just restore our internal resources, whether that be a nap or a walk with our dog in the woods. And then we need activities that engage. That's the E of the DARE framework. And so this can be hobbies, learning a new language. All of these activities are proven to enable our recovery. Now, the hard thing is, now that we've got this knowledge, how do you kind of cross that knowing doing gap where many of us get stuck? Like, I know I should get a good night of sleep, but right. And so what I like to think about is, how do you build in sort of micro experiences for recovery during your workday? And then what are some things that you can do after work that also enable you to kind of like hit some of these like DARE experiential recovery states?
You're going to tell us about saunas, right? Is this where saunas come in?
You know what? It may just for someone. That's the really important thing, is that recovery is different things to different people, right? For me, Dorie, you know this about me, but for
horses,
me, riding my horse, it solves it all. Like, immediately, I'm detached. I choose to do it. I am both relaxed and highly engaged at the same time. For other people, that is a terrifying thought, right? They would rather garden. And you know what? There's no judgment here. It's really whatever works. It's really whatever works. And building it in. And it's so fundamental. There's other studies that even show that leaders are judged as more effective. Like, if the leader has recovered at the end of the day of work, it could be like, maybe for that leader, it's playing video games, like they're detached. They totally enjoy it. It allows them to like relax. their direct reports judge them as more effective the next day. So your recovery not only feels good to you in the moment, but it's actually noticed by people who matter around you, not just your loved ones, but also your team.
Really interesting. Thank you. This is Dorie Clark, and we are here with Dina Denham Smith. She's the author of the book Emotionally Charged. If you want to make sure you never miss one of our conversations, subscribe at dorieclark.com/subscribe, and you'll get my email newsletter, and you can learn more about Dina and her work at dinadsmith.com. So please feel free to type your questions for Dina into the chat box. We'd love to hear what is on your mind. But in the interim, Dina, something I'm curious about. When we talk about all of this, you have an interesting metaphor that I like a lot. You talk about the art of managing beach balls. So to explain the metaphor here, where do beach balls come into it, and what does that represent?
Yes, I know. Funny, huh? So we liken emotions to beach balls. So I need to kind of back up before I get to the beach ball. But so what happens at work very commonly is we sometimes will suppress things that we feel, or, fake other emotions that we don't feel. And we do this because there's certain like unwritten rules at work about the emotions we show, how intensely we show them, when we show them, and so forth. And so this is emotional labor when you are working to display like the correct emotion for any given situation at work. And this is really like a very normal and understandable line of defense. The problem is that really like over time costs them out. But so the beach ball metaphor is, when we have a negative emotion and we just suppress it, ignore it, or hide it, it's like holding a beach ball underwater, right? So let's say someone has really upset us in a meeting, and you're just like, you grin, right? And you bear it and you make your way through that meeting. Well, what you've done is you've kind of controlled your behavior on the surface, and you have stuffed your feeling down like a beach ball, right? You're holding it underwater, and that takes effort. And you can typically hold it down for a while. But then inevitably, like something else happens, right? And now you've had a really frustrating situation where, God, I mean, it could be a million and one things. Like there's a slight, somebody maybe takes credit for your work, or you get asked to do something and your night plans just get blown out of the water. So you, again, fake, hide, suppress your upsetness. You stuff in another beach ball under the water. So you can just imagine, right? Like you're sitting there in the pool and you're trying to like hold all these beach balls under the water. Well, what inevitably happens is they start to pop out, right? And they pop out at bad times, and they pop out sideways, and somebody ends up getting hit in the face. Sometimes it's you, sometimes it's somebody else, right? So when we are just like suppressing and ignoring emotions, they don't actually go away. We have just sort of like stuffed them down temporarily. And there's some really big costs to that. And so the beach ball is a metaphor for that process.
That's great, Dina. That's really helpful. And I just want to say hi to some of the great folks who have tuned in. If you're just joining, feel free to type into the chat box. Let us know who you are and where you're dialing in from. But we've got Vincent from Quebec. We've got Marco from London. We've got Arnold from South Africa. We're glad to have all of you. And please feel free to type your questions for Dina into the chat box. We're coming into the denouement of our conversation. We've still got a little bit of time. But in the meantime, a question that I'm very curious about is, there's a lot of leaders, let's say they're bought in, they understand the reality. Yes, I need to do this now. One of the things that often is really hard for people is this question of emotional authenticity, because it's hard to kind of get the balance right, because you don't want to be this TMI leader that is just, an emotional mess all over your employees. You're empathizing so much that you're like oozing on them. But you also don't want to hold it at such a reserve that they're like, wow, like she doesn't care at all. So how do you thread that needle? What advice would you give someone who's struggling with that?
Yeah, this is the authenticity paradox for leaders, right? And this is some of the emotional labor they need to do, which is we are looking for our leaders to be composed and confident, yet just the right amount of human, right? And if they get too authentic, like you were just describing, there can be penalties for that, right? You can easily lose your credibility. And so I think about it as this like, it's this Goldilocks conundrum. Like, how do you get all of these things just right? And this is part of the emotional labor. And so again, for leaders, it's going to be assessing situations and figuring out how much of each of these things do I need to be showing right now? If you just think about that, like that is complex. That requires a lot of judgment. And over time, that's really taxing to be like, how do I show up now? Like, who do I need to be in this moment? Right. And it happens with authenticity. It happens even just as leaders, toggle between all of the different stakeholder groups, like how they show up with their team is different than how they show up with the executive team versus if they're at the board versus now there's like a key customer that they've been tasked with handling and trying to bring back into the fold. Like all of these situations have different display rules that leaders are sussing out and then, working to be effective within. And so this just adds to like that very sort of hidden and unacknowledged emotional work that leaders are doing day in, day out. So there is no magic like silver bullet for exactly how authentic to be when. This is like part of the nuance and the emotional labor that leaders do. But I oftentimes think about it as like they need to like walk this tightrope. And it just, again, for me, it highlights why leaders really do need to invest in their own recovery, because this work is kind of happening behind the scenes, but it's actual real work and it is fatiguing.
Yeah, thank you, Dina. That's great. We want to say hi to Hassan, who's here from Ethiopia, and Ellis is here from Cambridge, UK. Great having all of you here. We've got time for one last question. Dina, it's from Lucilla. She wants to know, how much should we share with our team about what's bothering us and our state of mind in a given time? This kind of ties in nicely with what you were just answering. But for a leader who's struggling with this particular question, what would you advise?
God, I don't mean to dodge the question, but it depends on what it is they're thinking about sharing and the context and with whom. I think oftentimes a certain amount of vulnerability is really important for leaders to show. And the reason is because it then makes it safe for their leaders or for their employees to do the same. And so someone has to go first. Right. And it's always going to be the leader. And so, you can dip your foot in, right? Like you don't need to share it all and just sort of read the audience. But oftentimes sharing what's on your mind, what's bothering you, like the things that are keeping you up at night, it allows your team members to do the same. And when you have this like broader range of emotions that are acceptable and discussed on a team, you do see higher team cohesion, you see higher team performance, greater creativity, more innovation. Like it can unlock a lot of goodness. So I would encourage it if you're unsure about the message. I would test it out with somebody that you trust, who also understands your context, and get some feedback from somebody who has more of the specifics of the situation that you're thinking about right now.
Fantastic. This is Dorie Clark. We've been here with Dina Denham Smith. She's the author of the new book, Emotionally Charged. You can learn more about Dina and her work at dinadsmith.com. You can subscribe to my newsletter to get updates about things like this at dorieclark.com/subscribe. And of course, Emotionally Charged is available now. You can pick up your copy as well. You should. Thanks to everybody for tuning in and for the great questions. And Dina, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone out there who joined us. It's really thrilling to have you all here.
All right, take care, everyone. Until next time.